Welcome to Unit 6. In the first 4 units we covered the basics which largely looked at structural changes. This unit will begin to test and stretch your knowledge of English in an attempt to make your message clearer and more effective. In this unit we're going to have a look at nominalisations. What's a nominalisation, I hear you ask? Let me explain. If you think back to the first unit which covered the most important rule in communication, the active voice, you'll remember it's made up of 3 parts: the subject, verb and object. My question, which is the most important? The subject, verb or object? It's the verb. Why? A strong verb tells you what is happening, in other words, the action. In the case of the subject and object, these are nouns which are affected by the verb. Who is doing the verb and who the verb is affecting. In English, you can form a sentence without either the subject or the object. It rarely occurs that a sentence can be formed without a verb. A strong verb informs and directs. You might have just caught what I said about a strong verb. Well, there are strong verbs and weak verbs. Weak verbs don't communicate a message by themselves and require a noun to fully communicate that message. For example, I am making a phone call to John. I have to provide a response to the questionnaire. I've been having conversations with them for the last 3 weeks. Each of these verbs, make, provide and have, are weak verbs because by themselves they don't communicate the message we want to communicate. Let's see this in action. I've taken away the nouns and look at what remains. Do the sentences make sense now? No, they need the nouns. So what you have here is a situation where a noun, in cooperation with a weak verb, communicates a message. Without the noun, you don't have the message. This weak verb plus noun structure is what is called a nominalisation. In short, a noun acting as a verb. Here we have a problem. If we remember that a verb is the most important thing in the active voice, in these examples the object is the strongest element and in all cases it forms the direct object. The real object then becomes an indirect object. What we've done here is to create distance in our message. This means that our message becomes weaker. Let's look again at the verbs used. By themselves, do they really communicate what we mean to say? Make means create or build. Does this have anything to do with calling someone? Does providing something really have anything to do with giving someone a response? Does have really have anything to do with talking to someone? In each case, the verb, the most important part of the sentence, doesn't directly communicate our message. So there are 2 things to bear in mind by using nominalisations. You've distanced your main message, making it weaker, and 2, used verbs which don't communicate your main message. So how do we fix this? You have to go to your noun, the noun which is communicating the main message, in all of the cases the direct object, and from that noun, get the verb. Then use that verb, free the verb as I like to say. In that case we get call, respond and converse. Therefore, we can make the following sentences. I am calling John. I have to respond to the questionnaire. I have been conversing with them for the last 3 weeks. In each case, we use a strong verb formed from the noun, and the indirect object becomes the proper direct object. We have the added advantage of using less words and making a shorter, more communicative and snappier sentence. In the case of converse, we could use talk, which is better understood, yet still appropriate for professional or business writing. Okay, now we know what a nominalisation is and how we can free the verb, have a look at these examples and correct them. And the answers are these. Not difficult, is it? Okay, now some words of warning, so pay attention. 1. there are lots and lots of weak verb and noun collocations which form nominalisations, and there are lots of nominalisations which do not use a weak verb. 2. Nouns may use dependent prepositions, or there may be certain language structures which follow the noun, whereas their strong verb alternatives may not use those prepositions, or use different prepositions, or have different language structures which follow the verb. So this is not just a case of find a nominalisation and change it. We have to think about the whole sentence structure. We can see this in the first example. Make a phone call to, which is the nominalisation, and call, the strong verb, which doesn't take a preposition. In some cases, as we saw with converse, you might choose to use a better verb. In that case, talk would be better, as converse is overly formal. In other cases, particularly with the weak verb be, you might need to redraft a large part of the sentence, or redraft all of it. Whew. As I said at the beginning, this unit will stretch your knowledge of English, and it will. Looking at all of these possible differences in detail is something I do in class, but is beyond this video. Instead, I would encourage you to have a look at the videos I produced for the legal writing course, or other resources on the internet. And you can find links to all of these things below the video. That being said, please have a look at the questions and correct the nominalisations which I've highlighted in bold.